Hello students, let us learn the second chapter of your English textbook today. Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. This chapter is an extract from the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, the first black president of South Africa. This extract from Long Walk to Freedom includes description of inauguration ceremony, quotes from his speech, his journey to being a freedom fighter, the struggle along with a tribute to the other freedom fighters and countless other people who fought for their freedom. As you all know, in South Africa, a brutal practice named Apartheid was followed. Apartheid refers to the discrimination between people on the basis of their race and color. It was one of the most brutal societies where dark-skinned people were deprived of their basic rights. This lesson gives us an overview as to how Nelson Mandela, along with others, paved their way to a society where there will be no discrimination on the basis of their color, caste, race, age, or gender. Now let us get into the chapter. Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. 10th May dawned bright and clear. From the past few days, I had been pleasantly besieged by dignitaries and world leaders who were coming to pay their respects before the inauguration. The inauguration would be the largest gathering ever of international leaders on South African soil. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheatre formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. For decades, this had been the seat of white supremacy, and now it was the site of a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations for the installation of South Africa's first democratic non-racial government. 10th May 1994 was the day when Nelson Mandela sworn in as the first black president of South Africa. It was after years of struggle that his anti-racist party, African National Congress, came into power. Until then, the seat of the president had always been occupied by white presidents. That is why the author Nelson Mandela referred to the day as bright and clear, because until then it was a dark period for them under the rule of the white rulers. It was a morning full of hope. Days before this date, 10th May, many notable personalities, the leaders of other countries or nations, started congratulating him for his victory. For the first time in the history of South Africa, so many international leaders came together for their inauguration ceremony. The ceremony took place in an open circular building made of sandstone consisting of Union Buildings in the Pretoria city. Pretoria city is one of South Africa's 3 capital cities, serving as the seat of the executive branch of government and as the host to all foreign embassies to South Africa. Cape Town is the other capital city. It is the legislative capital of South Africa. And Bloemfontein is the other capital city. It's the judicial capital of South Africa. On that lovely autumn day, I was accompanied by my daughter Zanani. On the podium, Mr. De Klerk was first sworn in as second deputy president. Then Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as first deputy president. When it was my turn, I pledged to obey and uphold the constitution and to devote myself to the well-being of the republic and its people. Nelson Mandela was accompanied by his daughter Zanani Mandela on his very big day. First, the 2 vice presidents took an oath. Then, when his turn came, he committed to respect, protect and abide by the constitution and to devote his entire self into the welfare of his own country. To the assembled guests and the watching world, I said, today all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. We who were outlaws not so long ago have today been given the rare privilege to host the nations of the world on our own soil. We thank all our distinguished international guests for having come to take possession with the people of our country of what is, after all, a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity. The author Nelson Mandela also mentions in some parts of speech where he said that everyone by his presence was giving rise to hope for a new beginning of a new era where there is no discrimination. Previous rulers were discriminatory and their rule lasted for long, but the ones who are given the opportunity to rule now The African National Congress and the government under Nelson Mandela would stand up against discrimination. He is glad to host that ceremony of transferring power from the white to the black in the presence of global leaders. It is an achievement itself. There was a time when South Africa, for practicing apartheid, lost all its international political relationships. Now, when there is no segregation or separation on the basis of race and gender or any other social identities, nations are happy to have healthy democratic relationship with South Africa. Finally, they have come to power and they pledged to make everyone proud. In his speech, Mandela thanked everyone, especially the international leaders, for joining them in celebrating their achievement, which is a step towards an equal society where everyone will be treated fairly and equally. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledged ourselves to liberate all our people from the counting bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender and other discriminations. Never, never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. Nelson Mandela mentions that after great struggle, they have finally achieved political freedom, political emancipation. He promised that his government would free everyone of the still existing poverty, hardship, and inequalities of all kind, and he assured everyone that under his rule, no community will be considered inferior. He then exclaims that freedom should rule and God may shower his blessings on their land, South Africa. A few moments later, we all lifted our eyes in awe as a spectacular array of South African jets, helicopters and troop carriers roared in perfect formation over the Union buildings. It was not only a display of pinpoint precision and military force, but a demonstration of the military's loyalty to democracy, to a new government that had been freely and fairly elected. Only moments before the highest generals of the South African Defence Force and Police, their chests bedecked with ribbons and medals from days gone by, saluted me and pledged their loyalty. I was not unmindful of the fact that not so many years before, they would not have saluted but arrested me. Finally, a chevron of Impala jets left a smoke trail of the black, red, green, blue and gold of the new South African flag. Just after the newly elected president's address to the audience, an impressive arrangement of fighter jets, helicopter and soldier transporters raised everyone's head up in the sky. It symbolized perfection as well as military's respect and obedience towards the newly elected government and to Nelson Mandela. The high commanders who have won medals for their bravery under the British rule also saluted and promised their loyalty or faithfulness to Mandela, the new president of South Africa. Mandela mentions that he was very well aware that these commanders who were now saluting him would have arrested him under the previous rule, as during the oppressive white supremacy, he was considered to be a criminal. The air show finally ended by making of the South African flag in the sky from smoke beneath the jets. The day was symbolized for me by the playing of our two national anthems and the vision of whites singing Noski Sikelel E Africa and blacks singing Dine Stem, the old anthem of the Republic. Although that day neither group knew the lyrics of the anthem they once despised, they would soon know the words by heart. The author Nelson Mandela remembers the day as the playing of the two national anthems of the country, one of the whites and the other that of the blacks. On that day, no one knew the wordings of the anthem of the black, but Mandela was confident that everyone would soon learn this anthem by heart, that everyone despised or hated once. On the day of the inauguration, I was overwhelmed with a sense of history. In the first decade of the 20th century, a few years after the bitter Anglo-Boer War and before my own birth, the white-skinned peoples of South Africa patched up their differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned peoples of their own land. The structure they created formed the basis of one of the harshest, most inhumane societies the world has ever known. Now, in the last decade of the 20th century and my own 8th decade as a man, that system had been overturned forever and replaced by one that recognized the rights and the freedoms of all peoples regardless of the color of their skin. On the day of the inaugural ceremony, the author Nelson Mandela was remembering the days of the past when this whole system of apartheid was emerged. It resulted in inequality and inferior treatment of dark-skinned people. They were deprived of their basic fundamental rights. As a result, one of the world's most brutal and inhuman society was born. This began even before he was born, even before Mandela was born. This system created an atmosphere of extreme cruelty and injustice for a particular part of the community, the black-skinned people or the dark people of South Africa. Now, when he is in his 8th decade as man, he along with countless others have changed that previous system and introduced a new system that treats every human as human, irrespective of their color, caste, gender or age. That day had come about through the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of my people whose suffering and courage can never be counted or repaid. I felt that day, as I have on so many other days, that I was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me. The long and noble line ended and now began again with me. I was pained that I was not able to thank them and that they were not able to see what their sacrifices had wrought. Mandela says that this equal and free country, the present-day South Africa, was a result of sacrifices of countless other men and women who have fought all their lives for this day. He wishes if he could thank them all, the people who sacrificed their lives, but unfortunately, they didn't live to see the result of their sacrifice and their courage. Nelson Mandela gathered his courage and power from all these people who sacrificed their life for making what South Africa was that day. And he wishes that he should make all those people proud by making a South Africa where there is no discrimination practiced. The policy of apartheid created a deep and lasting wound in my country and my people. All of us will spend many years, if not generations, recovering from that profound hurt. But the decades of oppression and brutality had another unintended effect, and that was that it produced the Oliver Tambos, the Walter Sisulas, the Chief Lutulis, the Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fishers, the Robert Subukos of our time. Men of such extraordinary courage, wisdom and generosity that their like may never be known again. Perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. My country is rich in the minerals and gems that lie beneath its soil, but I have always known that its greatest wealth is its people, finer and truer than the purest diamonds. According to Nelson Mandela, the policy of oppression has caused a deep wound in the minds of the black people, and it may take long time for them to repair that. Otherwise, it may take generations for them to come back to that former level. And he mentions that this bad time had its negative impacts, but it also exposed a lot of strong and courageous men like Oliver Tambos, the Walter Sisulas, the Chief Lutulis, the Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fishers, the Robert Subukos, who stood up and raised their voice against discrimination in South Africa. You might have noticed that Mandela used the definite article the before proper nouns, and he used proper nouns in plural form. By this usage, he is not just mentioning the people he mentioned here before, but he points to all the people who stood against the oppressive rule of the white people in South Africa. He assures that such people may not be seen in his country again because it requires that level of unjust treatment as it was done by the whites to the black to produce such heroes. What Mandela says here is that people of that courage and sacrificing mentality may not be seen in the country again, because if such people have to be born, it needs to have such brutality as it was displayed by the British. He promises that in his country, under the leadership of the black, there will be no such brutal treatment against anyone. He says South Africa is rich in minerals and gems, But the greatest strength of the country is nothing but its people, they themselves. It is from these comrades in the struggle that I learned the meaning of courage. Time and again, I have seen men and women risk and give their lives for an idea. I have seen men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and a resilience that defies the imagination. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Nelson Mandela gained his strength to stand against the wrong from all the great nationalists he mentioned here, who have even risked their lives for freedom and tolerated ill treatment, but never stopped fighting. He learned that courage didn't mean the absence of fear, but the ability to overcome that fear. The man who overcomes his fear is called a brave man. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to human heart than its opposite. Even in the grimmest times in prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits, I would see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards. Perhaps just for a second, but it was enough to ensure me and keep me going. Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. Nelson Mandela says that a person can be taught by his society to hate human beings because of their skin color, age, gender and religion. No one is born with hatred. It is taught to them. And what his idea is that if people can be taught to hate others, if they can be taught to hate, they can also be taught love and brotherhood, because love comes more naturally to human beings than hatred. In their most testing times in prison, when they were being treated brutally in the prison by the prison officers, Mandela would see a pinch of humanity and kindness in one of the guards. And that was enough for him to keep going, expecting that at the end of this, there will be a final day. He believed that goodness in human beings can be suppressed but never be eliminated. In life, every man has twin obligations to his family, to his parents, to his wife and children, and he has an obligation to his people, his community, his country. In a civil and human society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both of these obligations. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family, but in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. According to the author Nelson Mandela, every human being has two obligations, two responsibilities towards his family as well as to the society. Generally, under normal circumstances, a person can maintain the balance between these two obligations. But in countries like South Africa, it was never so easy. It was almost impossible. You cannot fulfill both your responsibilities at a time. When a person of color come up for his society, he would be arrested and taken away from his family. And thus, he will be kept away from fulfilling both responsibilities at a time. Either he can choose to be with his family or he can choose to be with the society. He cannot fulfill both the responsibilities at a time. In the beginning, Mandela did not put his people over his family. He was purely a family man. But it was only later when he realized that in order to be there for his people, he was compromising his duties towards his family. He was compromising the duty of a father, brother, son, and many of those responsibilities that he had to fulfill for his family. He could not do that because he was taken away from them. He was put in prison. I was not born with a hunger to be free. I was born free in every way that I could know. Free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow-moving bulls. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that I began to hunger for it. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself, the transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased and go where I chose. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, the freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. Nelson Mandela did not have plans to stand against the apartheid system in his early life. He lived his childhood like any other normal child in South Africa. He only had to follow the rules set up by his father or the customs of his tribe. As soon as he grew up and began to learn the facts as to how people of color or the black people are treated in South Africa, he decided to stand against that system of apartheid. He had this desire for freedom from inside earlier just for himself, for staying out at night, read what he pleased, and to go wherever he wanted to go, and later having a basic life not just for himself but for everyone. In Johannesburg, they were deprived of many things. They had to struggle for having a peaceful marriage, a family, and basic amenities which everyone has access to, where law and order exist. In such a place where law and order exist, they have to struggle for some basic amenities. But then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. That is when I joined the African National Congress, and that is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people. It was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity and self-respect that animated my life, that transformed a frightened young man into a bold one, that drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home, that forced a life-loving man to live like a monk. I am not more virtuous or self-sacrificing than the next man, but I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. Freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. Nelson Mandela joined the African National Congress, ANC, when he realized it is not only him whose basic rights were snatched away, but all those who looked like him also were deprived of basic freedom. He had this fire inside him to free his people from the injustice. It was this fire that changed him as a man from a scared young man to a brave warrior, a lawyer who obeyed the law to the one who breaking the law, a family man to a man without a home, a lively young man to being a monk. It was knowledge that he and his people have restricted freedom that made him into a selfless man as opposed to himself when he was sometimes before. According to Mandela, freedom cannot be divided. It cannot be separated from us. It is indivisible. Snatching it away from someone was equivalent to taking it away from everyone, and that meant taking it away from himself. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. Here, in the last part of the chapter, Nelson Mandela mentions the need to free the oppressor is as high as the need to free the oppressed, because the oppressor or the white people is bounded by the shackles of hatred. They are bounded by the shackles of narrow-mindedness. They are bounded by the shackles of selfishness. The oppressor has the weight of all the people who he has tortured because he carries the curses of all of their families. He carries the curses of all the black families in South Africa. So he has to be liberated. He has to be freed from that narrow-mindedness. What Mandela says is, when people take away someone else's freedom and make them a prisoner, they become a prisoner of biasness. Thus, he loses the most important quality that he has to have, that is humanity. When he has no humanity, he has no freedom. And Mandela promises that the black people are all set to show the white people what humanity is by not taking revenge on them. Now they have the power, they are ruling the country. The majority black people could have taken revenge on white people. But Mandela said they should live in harmony and there should not be any form of discrimination in that country. They decided to live along with the white people, considering them as their brothers and sisters. And that is a very sweet revenge that the black took on the white people there in South Africa. That's all the chapter. Now read the chapter well and watch the video again. Then answer all the questions given under the heading Comprehension Check. Not only that, I've given the meanings of some difficult words here on the screen. Note them down in a notebook and send it to my WhatsApp number before 5 p.m. today. Thank you for watching.